Middle East, it is very enticing because it is highly volatile. A lot of action all the time happens there, be it in Libya, be it in Gaza, be it in for that matter, Lebanon, Syria, all these have the potential of changing the landscape and escalating into a bigger war. Because the stability and security of the region is extremely important for India. Till 1970s, many people will not know, Indian rupee, in fact, was the legal tender in these countries. You will be surprised that a large number of these countries, leaders and people don't even realize that we are the second or third largest Muslim nation in the world. In my view, was a failure of our diplomacy not to be able to convey to them that you are banking on a failed state like Pakistan and you are not looking at India.
For a long time, it felt like the relations between the West Asia and India, it felt like still water. Then suddenly one incident happens, which was the Nupur Sharma incident. It felt as if the still water had ripples.
Nupur Sharma के बयान से विवाद शुरू हुआ, दिन पे दिन बीतते जा रहे हैं.
After the fall of Syria and the president over there, Israel attempted, I think, more than 480 airstrikes. So what kind of precedent that sets for the other nations?
Nothing. It says that it's a jungle raj. Do what you want.
Hamas weekend, Hezbollah weekend, Assad gone. How do you think Iran is going to manage all of this now? What should be India's long-term policy or the strategy while dealing with Middle Eastern countries?
I would not say what should be our policy. I think that what the Middle Eastern countries expect from us. They trust in India. They believe in India. They believe our foreign policy. But they want India to take a greater role.
Namaste Jai Hind, my name is Jayesh and this is The J Report, a podcast where we discuss everything that is happening in the world and in India. In today's podcast, we have a very special guest, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat ji. In this podcast, we are discussing what is exactly happening in West Asia or the Middle East. This is an intense podcast where we discussed what is exactly Trump's plan with Gaza Strip, wherein he wants to buy the Gaza Strip and he's looking at the whole problem as a real estate problem. Apart from that, we also discuss what is happening in Syria, what is happening with Turkey, what is happening with Iran. This is a West Asia special. I don't think after watching this podcast, you'll need to watch any other podcast on Middle East. Because in this podcast, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat ji explains everything about the Middle East, or as we know it as West Asia. Ambassador Anil Trigunayat ji has served in the Indian missions to Libya, Jordan, USA, Russia, Mongolia, and also Bangladesh. He is someone who knows West Asia in depth, and that is exactly why this podcast is so important. So without any further ado, let's start this podcast in 3, 2, 1. Ambassador Anil sir, you're welcome on this podcast. I've been looking forward to this specific conversation because the subject of the conversation, it really excites me because it is about Middle East or what we call West Asia. And as we were speaking off the camera, West Asia is a place that you just have to keep checking on every day because the parts are moving so fast over there that even if you predict anything, it might change in, let's say, like a 3-week period. So this is why this subject is so important. And I feel a lot of people in India, they don't pay attention to what is exactly happening over there. So we'll be talking about that. But just for the people who don't really know what is happening exactly in West Asia or the Middle East, can you give them a blueprint of what exactly is going on over there? Because till now we had seen some powers over there, but there's a churning of power happening even now. So what is exactly happening?
Well, first, yes, thank you so much. Happy that you have chosen Middle East or West Asia, as we call it, as a subject for discussion. It is very enticing because it is highly volatile. A lot of action all the time happens there. This is one of the regions where you have the maximum hotspots. And each of those hotspots, be it in Libya, be it in Gaza, be it in Iraq, or for that matter, Lebanon, Syria, all these have the potential of changing the landscape, number one, and escalating into a bigger war. And why it's so important for the region and for the world and for India particularly is because the stability and security of the region is extremely important for India.
Right.
Now, I would just, before we go into the dynamic there, let me talk about the India importance for India. Firstly, it is our extended neighborhood. This is one region we have been trading and visiting and staying there for 3,000, 4,000 years. It's not from now. It's been a civilizational connect from Dilmun civilization to Harappa and all that. Until very recently, until 1970s, I mean, many people will not know, Indian rupee, in fact, was the legal tender in these countries. And it's only after they became oil rich and all that they started going around, petrodollars came into play and things like that. We have had very close relations even during immediately after independence as well, because there were many of them were part of the non-aligned movement, and Egypt and others. I mean, you know the leaders. They have participated with us. So it's been something which is very close to us, and I say that it is important to us for 4 E's basically. The first is, I say, is energy security. We are getting about 70-80% of our requirement from the region for a long time. So therefore, stability is very important of supplies, energy supplies. For our own growth and security, it is very important. And they are nearest to us. That's another thing. And second, E is basically, I would put it as economic engagement. A very large number of these countries are trying to invest in India. Indians are investing in these countries. UAE is our 3rd largest trading partner. The Saudis are 4th largest trading partner. Iraq supplies us the maximum oil. And so all these countries, and if you put together all the GCC or the West Asia, they can become the largest trading partners for India. So economic engagement. Indian companies, we have in UAE alone, we have roughly about 12,000 companies. We have invested nearly $80 billion in the region. So whatever happens there is of importance to us. Thirdly, I would say is expats. India has about 9 million people. That's the critical part for us. And their welfare, the security is very, very important. And they are sending roughly about $50 to $60 billion to India, which is about 1/10 of your foreign exchange. You imagine. So you can see the criticality of it. Lastly, I put as ease of navigation, because all the sea lanes of communications, all the choke points, all are there. So we have seen what happened by the Houthi attacks recently. The commercial shipping was impacted badly. We have sent our Navy. Indian Ocean is our resident. We are the resident power there in the region. So from our point of view, security and stability is very, very important. But what happens in the region is, again, I'll put it as 4 Gs. So the geopolitical contestation, geo-economic contestation, geo-religious contestation, and geotechnological contestations now in recent years. Now that has become extremely important, and simultaneously they are playing around.
Right.
So, for example, we used to have, after 1979, the Shia-Sunni divide that came into play between Saudi Arabia and Iran, very major. Iran and Israel, that still continues very strongly, as we have seen in recent months. The most important is the Palestinian issue. And that is an issue which over 100 years now has not been resolved. We have seen that there have been several wars between the Arabs and the Israelis. But since 1973, there has been no direct war between Israel and Arabs. But then we have seen that from 2006 onwards, that Gaza, Hamas especially, which was established in Gaza, and has been in cahoots also with the Israeli establishment, essentially, who wanted to divide the Palestinian movement. So they supported Hamas at one time. So the war between Hamas and Gaza from 2008 onwards, and the one which is ongoing currently, it is a very shaky truce right now. So what we are looking at is that it's an extremely volatile place. Now, we have had the civil wars, like, for example, in Lebanon, and we have seen the Arab Spring some 10, 12 years ago, where major top regimes, whether it's in Libya, Egypt, starting with Tunisia, the leaders who were working for 40 odd years were all demolished. But
even Syria was a part of that.
Syria was the next.
Yeah.
And Syria was saved because of the Russian intervention. The Russians then understood the game that was going on in Libya. I was ambassador there at the time.
Right.
So they saw what was happening there, and they were losing ground completely. So they just secured Syria. And Syria, they had the port, the naval port in the Tartus, which is on the Mediterranean. So it was important for them. Then everybody started fighting ISIS.
Right.
And so then the Syrian regime eventually strengthened itself until very recently.
Yeah.
But that we can talk about it if you want to. So, but Syria remains still in some doldrums.
Hmm.
Then you have Libya, where there was a NATO invasion,
Yeah.
but the country has been destabilized completely. Tunisia is still not come out. Egypt has its own major problems of circulating the elites. You have problem in other countries which are suffering because of the, everybody is not oil rich.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So only 6, 7, 8, 10, 8 countries out of the 22 which are rich in oil. Rest of them are suffering, because whatever happens anywhere. So this is very important. But with this war, what we are witnessing is that I would like to put it as 4 Ds in a way. For example, there is a denial of the problem, right? That there is a problem exists. So Israelis don't think that Palestinian sufferings. Palestinians don't think that Israel has a right to exist. So we are seeing that. Terrorism, non-state actors are proliferating. Nobody's bothered about them. Now they're being legitimized. Then there is a denial. This is denial. Then there is a defiance. We are seeing the defiance of the international law, even by middle powers. So the international system is not able to operate, is not able to provide any satisfaction or comfort level to the global community that something collectively can be achieved. And that's why you can't stop the war even. You can't even bring about a ceasefire. It has taken 15 months. And then we are also looking at the disruption is like this, that despite being the mightiest country in the world, in the region, mightiest country in the world, we have seen what happened to USA in Afghanistan. After 20 years, it had to give power back to Afghanistan, Taliban. Now here it is, Israel is a very powerful country and in the region with a great intelligence and all. It had a loss of face on October 7th, of course, apart from the terror attacks. Because the mightiest Mossad, the mighty army, they were not able to prevent, and 251 hostages were taken, 1,200 people killed and all that. So that was a big setback for the Israelis. But people are questioning whether Israeli response of killing so many people, civilians and this and that, was the right response. Now that strategic calculation will have to be made because there is no victor at the moment, even now after 15 months. They are still talking to Hamas for a ceasefire or exchange of prisoners. So that's something. Then you are legitimizing these in one way. Then you have destruction, which is what is happening everywhere, or a fear of destruction. Throughout this war, we have seen that more and more you witness that there is no recourse to reason. Nobody listens to reason. I mean, the whole thing is that now one war is happened, so now you end it. And now you are looking at what President Trump has come in. One thing good he did was he threatened both sides that you stop the war before I enter the White House. So they agreed to some kind of a ceasefire. But yesterday's news says that the Hamas has gone back. It doesn't want because it feels that Israel has violated. Israel says they have violated. And now Gaza is up for sale. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
So we'll circle back to the Gaza plan and what Trump outlandishly said about the whole Palestine issue. But in one of your articles, because we spoke about what Middle East means for India, I want to quote this thing. Until the advent of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, India-West Asia relations were largely transactional and devoid of any strategic component. So what was the biggest catalyst that actually transformed India's approach in the recent years, at least since the Modi government has come in?
Well, why I say transactional is, and that's my view, is that we just took it like this, that we are buying oil, we are paying for it. Whereas, the historicity of our relationship was shrouded by Pakistan under the religious prism. Pakistan started claiming that it is the leader in the globe in South Asia, as Islamic leader, and they are Islamic countries. So the connectivity increased there, and we, on our part, we started thinking that now they are that close to Pakistan, and therefore they can't be that close to us. So this was such a, in my view, a very naive approach. Because you got to work. I mean, there are always vacuums for diplomacy where you can fill in. And you can't just let it be because of a presumption that they are close to XYZ. And it was proven. I mean, it's not that it was just out of the blue. It was proven by the behavior of these countries. But we got to work on them. And that's precisely what this government started working. So from a transactional relationship, transactional is that there are no stakes otherwise except buyer-seller, and our Indians are there, so we keep on working, and they start considering everybody is a blue-collar labor in India, and then the country's reputation also goes down to a great extent. But then this changed. Large number of Indians have started becoming bankers, the entrepreneurs, businessmen, and these countries' importance started increasing. Then they also started realizing that terrorism is something that is also going to hit them, or at least the tag that they get in turn because of supporting Pakistan or supporting Salafi Wahhabis philosophies is also not that great for them. So there was a realization in those countries.
Right.
Then, of course, the Arab Spring happened when they also got a bit, they need to reform in those countries. So it happens both ways. Now in India, I remember I was there in 2008 to 10, only we started thinking, you'll be surprised that high-level visits between the leaders is very, very important
Right.
for any relationship. Today, major diplomatic initiatives come out of the diplomacy conducted at the highest level in the leadership. You're seeing Prime Minister Modi today in Paris or going to US and all. So that shows a lot that how the diplomacy is conducted today. So we did not have a visit after Mrs. Gandhi's to any of the Gulf countries. Could you imagine that? We did not have in many countries, nobody was going there. They're just 2 hours away.
But what was the reason behind that?
Well, it's very difficult to say. I told you the reason was that their behavior themselves, those countries, and our lack of appetite for doing that. We had our own problems.
Yeah.
1991, there was a war. We had to go for economic reforms. So we were focusing on different things. Oil purchases were going on.
Yeah.
So I think we took it easy. We started focusing more on the West.
Right.
And some other areas and tried to strengthen in a different way. But you cannot be complacent in my view. So we arranged the visits of the then Prime Minister, to Oman, to Qatar, to Saudi Arabia, to Kuwait, to these countries. And it changed the complex. It started from them. There was a Riyadh Declaration which was signed in 2010 in Saudi Arabia, and I was personally a part of it and drafted it. First time with Saudi Arabia, we started talking of terrorism, pinpointing that where is the terror coming from.
Okay.
Then we saw OIC you remember the story of the OIC. So in all of them ganged up against India.
Right.
So India thought that all these Islamic countries are actually against us. But that was not true. You will be surprised that a large number of these countries, leaders and people don't even realize that we are the second or third largest Muslim nation in the world.
Correct, yeah.
That is, in my view, was a failure of our diplomacy not to be able to convey to them that you are banking on a failed state like Pakistan, which is basically surviving on your crumbs. And you are not looking at India, where you have had the presidents, the vice presidents, the chiefs of the air staff and all that. I mean, intelligence and all kinds of people who are from the minority communities in India. We have the best actors, which have been the top actors of India, are Muslim. So we somehow failed to convey that. Once they realized this, they started looking back. That it's not only Pakistan, the others too. And this precisely then when Prime Minister Modi came to power. And I must say, and I always say in the last 10 years, if you were to reassess our relationships with any other region, I think our relationship and the foreign policy success basically lies with West Asia. It was highly successful because today our relationship with West Asian countries is changed from transactional to truly strategic.
Right.
And for that, a lot of credit goes to Prime Minister Modi. I mean, you remember he went first visit he took was to UAE. Now UAE has become our closest partner. He's been there 7 times. The Emir has come here 4 times. He's been to Kuwait, all the countries actually. With Egypt, we have signed a strategic partnership because we're looking now at the Mediterranean and for Africa. All these countries have conferred the highest honor over the Prime Minister.
I think even with Oman, we are signing an FTA.
Yeah, we are discussing with the UAE. Our FTA is an ideal FTA. Now we are discussing with the GCC also, India GCC FTA. So these are very important initiatives that are taken. Then security, defense cooperation, cyber security, intelligence, because these countries are also now realizing that they have to diversify their economies. So they're no longer dependent so much on the hydrocarbons. So they are also changing it completely. Then we're feeling that the United States is a bit retrenching itself from the region. For example, they are more focused on Indo-Pacific, for example. So therefore, these countries' leaders also started thinking in terms of changing their policy. So they're becoming, especially the stronger ones, are becoming more, following more strategic autonomy. They call something called active policy, means looking towards their markets. For example, India, China, Japan, South Korea. They're focusing more on those regions. They're more investing in those countries, creating stakeholderships, bilateral swap of the trade and everything, So they are also focusing where the growth is. And India is a growth story today. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's why it has changed. Then Pulwama, for example, because of the relationship, the way it has gone, they said that this was India's internal problem. They have to internal issue. Kashmir is no longer a problem for them, even though OIC keep on issuing statements. Pakistan is no longer a factor impacting on our relationship. That's why I say it's been a great success. Apart from the trade, investment, everything that has been coming and going, can be more, but the commitments are there.
Yeah. But for a long time, it felt like the relations between the West Asia and India, it felt like still water. I mean, it was going on smoothly and everything was fine. Then suddenly one incident happens, which was the Nupur Sharma incident, wherein she gave a statement on a news channel, which was perhaps, I don't want to comment on it that it was right or wrong, but the statement was made and it felt as if the still water had ripples. And on a large scale, everything just felt like it is going to shatter away. So, what happens at times like these, and how do diplomats then channel their energies in such cases?
Well, I think that you have to be sensitive about the sensibilities, religious sensibilities of countries and your partners. India is a country where all religions have thrived. 4 religions were born here and everybody else has come here. We have become a crucible. So when something like that happens here, obviously it conveys a wrong signal. And in every country, there are a certain coterie, certain kind of people who would like to rock the boat for different reasons. There are Islamists in different countries. So they take advantage of these situations. So these kind of, in my view, unnecessary comments about a religious leader or about their messenger or whatever it is you call. So I think that is something that goes, and it's misinterpreted very often.
Right.
And then, those extremist elements in those countries start and they think they're about religion. This happens. This is unfortunate, but this is true. So we have to be careful ourselves in this. This is an issue. And it was not an issue with the leadership so much. Leadership may think differently, but the grassroots people are also equally important.
Right.
And that's the issue. Palestinian issue has become now a very vibrant issue once again. And that was the objective of the Hamas. And that's how they did it. But so this can happen that. So we have to be very careful.
Right.
A job of the diplomat becomes difficult in such situations because then you have to go and convey, tell them exactly that, this is not government's policy. This is not what we're doing it. This is an, incident or a slip of tongue or whatever you may call it. So you got to go and convince them and then find ways how that fallout can be contained. And it was contained very quickly, actually, if you see. There were no comment directly from the governments of the countries. There was something in Kuwait, something in Qatar. We had our vice president visiting at the time and there was some ripples there. But overall, I think they understand where the butter for their bread lies.
Yeah. Okay. In one of the articles that you've written, you write about wars and their impacts are not unconnected or limited to a particular geography. Now, given the rapid changes in West Asia, like let's say from Israel's expansionism to what Iran is doing and Iran's diminishing influence, in fact, do you think the region is moving towards long-term instability?
Well, it's already been
it has been unstable,
very long
unstable,
time for an unstable. You see, I feel that it cannot be stable. Many people may argue it out until unless the fundamentals are not corrected. Fundamentals are that the issue of Palestine, it has to be resolved one way or the other.
But is it the core issue that binds whole of West Asia?
It doesn't bind them.
Yeah.
There is a fatigue, Palestinian fatigue, which has started happening. That's why you see Abraham Accords. That the countries thought that let's move on and try to impress upon the Israelis to come to terms.
Right.
That did not happen. There is a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The Iranians and the Egyptians and the UAE and others. So what they're trying to do today is trying to work on some kind of a modus vivendi, even if not the friendship. They have some kind of a developed security architecture. Iran and GCC are talking. Iran and Egyptians are talking. So that's that. Turkey is the third pole, which is also talking to each other. So they are trying to do that. But the Iran and Israel issue mainly is very much also dependent on the Palestinian issue. Because see, the Arab countries, as I said, Arab fatigue occurred on the Palestinian issue. The Iranians, the Turks took advantage of that and became the champions of the Palestinian cause. And then they have these 3H or 4H, Houthis, Hamas and Hezbollah, which have been decimated now, working as providing them asymmetric advantage in the region. Today it's not there. So you go around all over, but at the end of the day, the critical questions are very important also to be resolved. And what happens is in situations like that, that becomes the issue which is flagged more. Today, Saudi Arabia has once again become the champion of the Palestinian cause. They have set up a committee of the Arab countries with the implementation of two-state solution. They are telling Trump, that there can be no normalization of ties with Israel unless Palestinian issue is resolved or a state is coming there. So at the end of the day, it proves that those are very important issues. Of course, their own progress, development, internal strife, all these are equally important within the countries. Their differences, their ambitions for influence, regional influence, and being a power, that is very much there. That's always in play wherever there are bigger countries involved. So that will remain there. But that does not mean that they'll go to war for that.
Right.
But these things can create a problem. For example, hypothetically, Iran-Israel war starts. Iran may not be able to hit every Iranian-Israeli target, but they can always hit some targets in the Arab countries. This will escalate beyond a point. And supply chains will be disrupted. The people, foreigners, so many of them, millions of them are living there. They will be in the thing. What I say is not only one issue, but that issue becomes the focal issue around which you will see the country's population, because at the street is very important.
Right.
Leadership are there, but the Arab street is equally important.
Right. In fact, would you argue that what happened with the West regime change operations in the West Asia, has it sort of brought in the instability that we are seeing today? Because, of course, they might have wanted a democratic outcome, but that has not happened.
You see, we are the largest democracy in the world, but we don't have a project democracy. We support democracies. The problem with the West is that they only think that the only democracy is Westminster-style democracy. But these are the tribal countries. They are the countries with different kind of traditions. Their democratic thinking is very different, whether it's Africa or in Middle East or anywhere else. So imposing their will through regime change, in my view, is counterproductive. And that's precisely what has happened here. They think, because see, there is no plan. There's a plan is destruction. One of the biggest, in my view, the mother of all evils in recent times has been the invasion of Iraq.
Right.
Saddam Hussein was not a saint. On the contrary, quite devilish. But at the same time, he was at least not allowing the terrorism to happen. And there was no weapons of mass destruction.
Even Gaddafi, right?
Gaddafi is exactly the same thing. Yeah. Gaddafi, in fact, is a very ironic case. When he was trying to befriend with all these Western countries, that's when he was taken out. While he was fighting with them for so long, nothing happened to him. So I think that this is not served. Of course, the last regime change was in Syria very, very recently.
Yeah.
Other countries are still suffering, a large number of them, which don't have the resources.
Right.
The only countries that are keeping a lot of things under the lid are the Gulf countries, who are able to, because of the richness that they are able to play around and maintain some semblance of stability and prosperity. But they are in danger because of the regional conflagration that may happen.
In the same article that you wrote, you have written that Netanyahu lost no time and capitalized on power vacuum in Syria by capturing the whole of Golan Heights. Now, how much of Israel's military adventurism is strategic and how much of it is driven by Netanyahu's political survival at this moment?
I think political survival, in my view, was because of what he did in the wake of October 7th.
But was his political stance or his political popularism, was it falling?
Oh, it fell significantly. In fact, it started coming back. He has these charges against him, corruption charges, and people who are in the know of things there say that he might go to behind the bars for that. That's very likely. Then he tried to change the judicial system, making his parliament to be the supreme or whatever it is over this. They don't have a written constitution, as you know. So he had internal problems in the country. And then he was overconfident that nothing can happen from Hamas now. We have already beaten them. And he started focusing more on West Bank. So all these things gelled at a time. Then, because they were probably overconfident, and that's the reason that they got hit so badly. But coming back to Netanyahu, off and on, this is the fact that whenever there was a chance of the ceasefire or some kind of a thing, Biden, I have never seen a more harassed foreign minister than Blinken. A poor fellow who used to come, take the drubbing from all sides, and go back, was not able to do, because their fundamental foreign policy is to secure Israel.
Right.
For that, they cannot compromise. But they still wanted some kind of a peace there and working for it, some kind of ceasefire. But that could not happen. So it is something I feel that the Netanyahu wanted to take advantage. Plus, under his charge, October 7 happened. Now, that was not something that you could take it lightly. So his response was, as has always been the response of the Israeli military and leadership. But by completely decimating and killing the leadership of Hezbollah, killing the Hamas leadership, attacking Iran and all, I think that the people, Israelis, thought that he's the right guy. And so his popularity has once again increased. But that does not mean that once the war ends, and the commission will be set up for fixing responsibility, that he'll be spared. That is unlikely. You have seen that the IDF chief has resigned. You have seen the Shin Bet chief has resigned, taking responsibility for this. So this is something that is bound to happen there. So he's been just trying to delay it.
But what kind of precedent does it set? Because after the fall of Syria and the president over there, Israel attempted, I think, more than 480 airstrikes. So what kind of precedent that sets for the other nations in the neighborhood?
Nothing. It says that it's a jungle Raj. You do what you want. It's simple. I mean, that's what I said, defiance of the international law, clearly. You see, Israel, if you were to think from Israel's perspective, it also wanted to take advantage of the vacuum, because, see, Israel has tremendous intelligence. And that's why I always say, I told some of their people I met, I said, look, your strategy in dealing with Hamas has not been that great.
Right.
What you did to Hezbollah, if you had done to Hamas, the whole world's sympathy would have continued to be with you. Like in the beginning, only if they had removed their leadership. Anyway, but what they are trying to do now is exactly the same. So they're trying to secure themselves, that they knew, although they had a great understanding from 1974 onwards with Syria, that there was a buffer zone, and then the buffer. So they took control of the buffer zone. They were basically worried that this HTS and these terror groups and all that will come, and then they will have another headache on their hands. So firstly, they removed the lethal power of forces of the Assad government when he was gone. And secondly, they occupied that place and the Golan Heights, which is they gives them the greater advantage towards both Lebanon and Syria. Now they are watching everything what is happening there. So they took the strategic heights for their advantage. So it is strategic. It is not something which is just done like that. But of course, nobody was expecting that this could happen so soon and with such speed.
But how do you think the Israel and US equation will change in the coming years? Because when Trump was coming to power, he had told Netanyahu that finish the job before I come in. And with Trump's statement about Palestine and moving the people out of there and looking at the whole problem like a real estate problem. So, what do you think this equation is going to be now?
Nothing. Trump and Netanyahu support each other.
Hmm.
It'll
So it
remain
will
the same.
continue. Yeah. Yeah.
You see, any government in the US, whether it's Democrats or
Yeah.
Republicans, they will remain invested in Israeli security. All these Abraham Accords and this and that, they are all part of the same plan. So that's perfectly fine. But then they all have to learn to work together in the region, because Israel is a part of the region. It's not going anywhere. Palestinians have to understand that Israel will remain a state. It was done during the Oslo Accords and everything. Now, Hamas has been battered a bit. So it should also understand that a political solution is the only way out. And Israeli leadership, whichever comes next, must be able to work. And the Americans must remain invested in resolving the problem, not complicating it further.
Hmm. But what will happen with Iran? Because again, the Israel-Iran, it almost felt like it could escalate at any moment. And it did happen in some manner. But what is the future of Iran from here?
Iran, outside Iran does not seem to have any major problem from external this thing, because militarily Iran is quite strong. There's no doubt. Iran's issue could be domestic and internal, and these sanctions. And that's the reason now they are trying to talk to the Americans to renegotiate the agreement. Trump is also open to that idea. If that happens, then a lot of pressure will be taken off from them.
Yeah. But with Hamas weekend, Hezbollah weekend, Assad gone, how do you think Iran is going to manage all of this now?
It doesn't have to then in that case. You see, even you don't, let's not forget that before 1979, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel all were part of the US camp. And so we don't know how the transition in Iran will take place. Suppose today you have a Dr. Pezeshkian who is said to be a conservative reformist leader who is trying to reach out along with his vice president, whom everybody knew. So they are trying to reach out to the West. But Ayatollah Khamenei himself does not approve of these kind of measures. He's still taking the hard line, but he's quite old. And there will be a succession issue. So we don't know who's going to come, what happens inside. Youth is not that very happy. So possibly some countries might try to fend the trouble there, inside. So if you have a different kind of a government, then the things might change completely. So it's still a lot of ifs and buts there. But at the same time, I don't see that under the current regimes, both in Israel and in Iran, there's going to be any change in their stance vis-a-vis each other. I say they suffer from this something called MAD syndrome.
But recently there was this report by Telegraph which claims that Iran is developing a nuclear-capable ballistic missile with a 3,000 kilometer range. If this is true, how will this change the global security balance?
Well, it'll be then you will see the Saudi Arabia also going in for that nuclear. Then there'll be other countries also. So it'll become far more volatile. Already the map is changing, but it could change even more. And you will have the weapons of mass destruction in the region, and then you have the non-state actors which are growing powerful day by day, and are also being legitimized. So there will be a double whammy in the sense in the region, which would be very dangerous.
Because in one of the articles you have also written that Tehran conservatives may push for early acquisition of nuclear weapons to counter the Israeli forces. Now, how does that?
Not to counter the Israeli forces. The thing is that they are under a lot of pressure. Now, if currently what has happened is that I said about the asymmetric advantage of the 3H, if that has been reduced significantly, in that sense, how does it, compensate for it? It can compensate by becoming nuclear, and as the reports go, that they already have a 90% capability. Maybe they already have something, but you never know. At the same time, they are also openly, at least, advocating a possibility of a renegotiated deal, which allows them the civil nuclear cooperation and other things, plus reduction in sanctions. If that happens, then Trump will consider it a victory for himself. And Israelis may not be very happy, but the problem will be deferred for some time.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned that half a century of Assad regime ended on December 8. Now, given the speed and ease with which HTS took over, what does this exactly mean for, let's say, particularly Turkey and the US?
Well, in the first place, I think that Assad, President Assad, was uh, uh, just frittered away the window that he had of 10 years. From 2015 to 2025, he refused to engage with his people, with the opposition groups. Turkey has been wanting to talk to him. He spurned Turkey. He thought that he is now finally, with the help of Russians and Iranians, he has acquired 90% of the territory, but he was not able to control all that. And that now he'll be accepted. And of course, the Arab world accepted him in the Arab League and others. But the people weren't happy. As you can see from the jubilation on the streets, nobody was happy. So he did not invest in his people. He did not connect with them. He didn't connect with the opposition. So he had really created a green field for overthrow, which was done. And he was continuing only with the thread of the Russian and Iranian support. Now, as it happened, we have seen Russia is far too busy with his Ukrainian venture. The Iranians have been already, as I said, it was the Houthis, Hezbollah, and others who are talking and supporting them there, not Iran directly, engaged in the war. So there was no support possible. And there are, of course, why Russians did not support this time, or the Iranians could not support this time, is also written about a lot. But at the same time, it was going on for 5 years, as the HTS claims. Many people say it was at least in 22 they wanted to overthrow him, but then they were prevented from doing so. This group has been supported by Turkey.
Yeah.
They're supported by the US. But US and Turkey are at loggerheads in the northeastern part, where it is the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, which are supported by the Americans, because they also fought with the thing. They are Kurdish forces, but Turkey is dead against them. Then you have a Syrian National Army, and the Syrian National Army is supported by Turkey. So they are fighting with each other there. In addition, there are about 60 odd other Islamic groups, militant groups, who initially joined them, but now they don't want to give up their arms. They don't want to be. So that problem of territorial problems will remain among major groups. How it is resolved remains to be seen. For the time being, I think Turkey is in a much greater advantageous position. United States also has got its objective of regime change, which they wanted. They, of course, have about 2,000 people, soldiers there, which under Trump may call them back. If it calls, it's fine. But then they are there to fight the ISIS. ISIS is very much present there even now in Syria. So we are going to have these sort of uncertainties in Syria going forward. It's not going to go.
You don't see stability coming there anytime soon?
Well, I will hope this is stable, because the people of Syria have suffered a lot. I mean, 13 million people are displaced. Can you imagine? The country has suffered for no rhyme or reason, but they have to now come back. And for the people of not for any other reason, but hopefully it will happen. But now this guy, Al-Shara, is accepted everywhere. He's talking, he's like behaving like a statesman and all that, which is a good thing. I mean, I would expect stability. But again, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is because of the external powers that you don't see stability in the region. And even here, it is the same thing. You have counterpowers. Iran has lost a great deal. Russia has lost a great deal. They're trying to keep their ports and others. Turkey is in a very happy position. But Turkey has a little issue with the Americans on the Kurdish issue. So everything is not settled till it's settled. Yeah.
But is this has Putin lost Syria now?
He has lost Syria in the sense is that he was, supporting completely, fully backing Assad. So if Assad is gone, then your influence is gone. That is precisely the issue. But Russia is a superpower. And what I'm learning is that they will continue to engage with this guy. And they will also like to, because some people say, rightly so maybe, but you don't know till everything is become that possibly the Moscow and Ankara had agreed that Russia will not back because this fellow himself was not helping himself, Assad. So obviously the Russians had no bandwidth to help him. So it was that their strategic assets will not be touched, although they have one strategic port and base in Libya now. So they're trying to shift there. But at the same time, I think they want to keep it because this is the one Mediterranean, very strategic port for them, for Africa and elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, now this group has its roots in Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Do you think this is beginning of another extremist stronghold in the Middle East?
Well, I think that if you go by the theory that you can change your colors, but you can't change your texture. So if that is the case, then they will always remain there. You see, the thing is, then in Liberia, where they have they've been ruling, that is ruled by completely conservative manner.
Yeah.
Like Taliban types. Total this thing. Now, Syria is a very diverse country. Different religions, minorities, people are very free, intellectually very sound. So obviously, they want freedom to do what they want, especially for women. So what he is saying is that everybody can keep their own traditions, they can continue. Of course, there will be a certain code of conduct, but it will not be as strict as, for example, in Idlib. Now he has about nationals of 30 countries who are fighting with him in his terrorist forces. Now those people are not the same as him, possibly. He's more maybe pragmatic. So just to see. But if he's truly what he says, that I was once with the ISIS, I was once with Al Qaeda, but I'm no longer with them, I've given up and all that. If that is true, then he may probably guide them in the right direction. But if he gets back into or still remains his connection, then obviously all these groups are there and they can always gel well together.
But you mentioned Turkey and how Turkey is taking its stance and becoming even more powerful. What do you think of the new Quad, which is the I2U2? India, I think it's USA, UAE, India, and Israel. So how is this going to counter Turkey?
Well, the thing is, it was not to counter Turkey in that sense. It has provided us something which we did not discuss. We have had bilateral relationship with most countries so far. But we did not have a sub-regional or regional approach to issues. So I2U2 turned out to be one of those major instruments where you have India, UAE, USA, and Israel. And the three regional countries Asian countries have a lot of commonalities and convergences, with the United States being there, which is a catalyst. Then you have another one, IUSU, India, USA, Saudi Arabia, UAE. And then you have IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So these are in my view, initiatives by Indian government, essentially, to have a regional approach or a sub-regional approach. But IMEC, of course, as soon as IMEC was announced, and that was announced in New Delhi itself, you know that President Erdogan went publicly saying that without Turkey, it cannot work. Turkey thinks itself a center, it's a Eurasian center, and all corridors go from there. Plus, they started working on the UAE, Qatar, Turkey corridor. Syria also is a transit point for the Turkish corridor. So it'll also come from there. So obviously, IMEC is working between India and UAE and Saudi Arabia. Still, things are going on. And it is not simply a connectivity issue. It is a connectivity in different dimensions, from energy to data to, the trade and all that. So I think that Turkey feels threatened. Israel also, for that matter. Egypt, because Suez Canal already under a lot of pressure. And if you have alternatives like that, so they think that their revenue might be. But we must always not forget that one ship got stuck in Suez. And that created such a mess. One Houthi attacks have created such a mess. So you need alternate pathways for trade investment also. How and which one will be more successful remains to be seen, because it will depend on how efficient and how hassle-free they are.
Yeah. But US has been supporting the IMEC. And with Turkey now being against US in a way, wherein the Kurdish militias come in. So how do you think this dynamic is going to play out?
Don't forget, Turkey is also a NATO country.
Yeah, it is a
There are
NATO,
34
yeah.
bases, American bases in Turkey.
Correct.
So it's not that. I mean, this is one of the issues in their relationship.
Which can be solved.
Which can be solved. I mean, I think that Blinken had gone there and talked to them. For Turkey, it is simple. You know, they don't want to let these Kurdish influence remain. And now, how does the SDF, the HTS deal with them? Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They are being supported by Turkey. Now, will they take on this? They have told them to come and join the thing. You know, if the SDF joins the army, then it will be a different kind of a thing. That means that movement against Turkey would be reduced significantly. So they will find ways to work around. But right now, there are too many moving parts in Syria.
And you've written that Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar fully supported the regime change agenda in Syria. So are these Gulf states now the power brokers of Middle East?
Actually, you know, since the Arab Spring happened, everybody was worried after that once these big guys were removed. So many of these countries were used by the United States as a conduit for supplying arms ammunition. So we saw the weaponization of the foreign policy by these three countries and, of course, Iran and Turkey. They are there already. So, and they are all the region for playground is the same for all of them. So we saw that happening, and that was something which was a problem, very a problematic issue. But at the same time, of course, they are now thinking of their own growth. So you are right. I mean, they are looking at power brokers or influencers. Today, a lot of them have bases in Africa in different parts. They're playing a much bigger role than other foreign powers in Africa, whether it is Yemen or whether it is in Somalia, Somaliland, Horn of Africa. So those are the areas where these countries are equally important and powerful. Turkey, for example, is a major player in Libya.
Right. And what about Qatar then? Because
Qatar is a small country.
yeah,
but
but
a
it
very
was
rich
blockaded,
country,
right?
Very rich country. It was blockaded because of their internal problems.
Hmm.
Because they thought that Qatar has started punching above its weight, and whatever they were doing, Muslim Brotherhood and all those support to them was a major problem for the Saudis and for the because they go, although they're themselves a monarchy, but the Muslim Brotherhood has been a big no-no for Egypt, for the UAE, for Saudi Arabia. And that's why they tried to do that. There are many reasons. If you remember, they gave them 13 conditions to comply to Qatar. But finally, Qatar has very smartly managed itself and become an interlocutor or go-to country in the region. For example, in Taliban's case, they were the main players. Doha agreement was signed there, exchange of prisoners with the Americans, with others. And this is what even the Saudis and the Emiratis are doing between Russia-Ukraine war. So these countries are playing their role very smartly. And now, fortunately, they're coming around together within GCC and bilaterally. Qatar has agreed that Saudi Arabia is the big boss in the region, and we all need to work with them.
And for India, Middle East is a really important place now. But with the extent of China and what it is doing and the growing influence of its powers in Middle East, do you think this will be a problem for India in the longer run?
Yes, of course. China will be our biggest challenge in every geography.
Yeah, because in Africa it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. But these countries are also very smart. You see, now gradually more and more countries are beginning to exercise strategic autonomy. They don't want to depend on one or the other. Right? That's a saving grace in many ways. So India will have its own relationship, which is more civilizational. Other China is also in a very big way entrenched there. The most of them are part of the BRI project.
Yeah.
They appreciate the Chinese three Gs as a GSI, GDI, GCI, Global Development Initiative, Security Initiative, and Civilizational Initiative. They support all those. Plus, China is playing a good role. I mean, for example, in Russia, in Saudi Arabia and Iran, I mean, rapprochement, they work together. They worked even in Iran nuclear deal. They worked with the US and the Europeans. So Chinese are taking a lot of advantage of the situation. They are deepening their ties. So far, they seem to be more economical, but there is nothing simply unifocal there. When whatever is the economic or the ports or other things that they have done, they can always convert it into a military asset.
But the way it has brokered that Iran-Saudi peace deal, do you think it can do the same for Israel and Palestine?
No, they can't do between Israel and Palestine. No,
Reason being?
that only America can, because see, Israel is only country that can control or steer Israel is United States. No one else in the world can do it. That's my belief. And there also they have to handle them with a lot of softly. Palestinians, yes, what Chinese tried to do was bring about. Can you give me some water, please? Eh? So they basically tried to bring about all the Palestinian groups, and there are 8 or 10 of them. They met in Beijing, and then they're continuing to work with them, both Hamas and that. So I think that this is a role that they try to play. They are not trying to be arbiter, because although they have economic interests in Israel, in Hyperport, and they're doing a few things there, and quite a few investment. Israel also wants Chinese investments, but to be able to part of this, I think, will be very difficult in my view.
Till now, US was calling a lot of shots in the Middle East, but now it is tracing its footprints back. And if China is able to increase its military footprints over there, do you think it will be the beginning of a multipolar power situation in Middle East?
There has always been a multipolar power situation. It's only that after the disintegration of Soviet Union, that we are seeing that there was a unipolarity concept which came about. But in the Middle East, they have also become equally smart. They are looking at new markets, where their markets are, so they are increasing the relationship with those countries. So in that sense, it's quite good. But there will always be many players, and if there was only one player, then you will have no problem. But since there are so many players undercutting each other, that we are going to have problems, not only in Middle East, but nearly every geography, because very often it's the nature of the competition.
In fact, you've written that the US and Europeans know how to legitimize terrorists and non-state actors overnight according to their flexible standards. Do you think the US actively wants instability in the region to maintain their control?
Maybe the rape state wanted it, but I mean, proof of the pudding is in eating. What happened to Taliban? Number one, they created Taliban with the help of Saudi Arabia and Pakistan to fight the Soviets, 70s, 80s. Then once that was done, the 9/11 happened, right? And Taliban was not part of it. But they bombed Taliban because the Al-Qaeda leader was there. And they came in for 20 years. After that, they signed an agreement without telling their European partners and anybody else with the Taliban to hand over the power to them. So what are you doing? Legitimizing them, isn't it? First you create them, you fight them, you decimate them, then you legitimize them. So that's the one proof. There have been stories that there have been, now USAID, you are seeing it, the kind of role it has played. It has all come out in the public now. There is a role of Pentagon there. There is a role of CIA in different parts. The kind of people they bring in. I mean, I was in Libya and I have seen that all these Al-Qaeda elements and everybody were brought in by these Western powers to fight Gaddafi. And they also did the same in Syria. So at the end of the day, they think that we have enough power to eventually control them. But I always say they are like bhasmasurs. They will burn you to ashes. You have to be careful in dealing with terrorists. What has happened in Syria is the latest example. Until yesterday, the guy 10 million bounty on you. Then you have the all kinds of designated terrorist groups and all. But today you are having chai with them.
Right. So coming back to India. India has always maintained this stance wherein it has supported the integrity of Syria. Now with Assad gone, do you think it is time for India to rethink its policies of Middle East, or especially with Syria?
Well, I think that we'll deal with them as it long. I mean, let the government settle down. I'm sure we have an ambassador, we have an embassy, everybody is working there. We've been providing them humanitarian assistance. Frankly, I mean, India's policy has been that you want to resolve your problem, do it yourself. Yeah, international countries, especially the West, they believe in military interventions to effect the change. India says that it is for the people of the country. Now, that's our policy always been. We've been against the military interventions of this kind unless authorized by the United Nations. Yeah. But they use sanctions, they use all kinds of things and try to create these kind of differences and situation in the country. So I'm quite sure that soon we'll be supplying them some humanitarian assistance because this is what they need. We are already giving about $5 billion.
But why do we help them when we know that HTS has its roots in Al Qaeda and the ISIS? Isn't that very dangerous for India as well?
No, we are not. We are not helping Al Qaeda or HTS. It is for the people of Syria. Ordinary people of Syria are suffering. We have been providing assistance through United Nations and others to the Syrian refugees. I myself handed over checks to the Jordanian government for the Syrian refugees. So it is for the people of Syria, basically. And that's why the Taliban today is coming to India.
Correct.
Asking that, because they know that we work for the people of the country, for the development of those countries. And there's a difference in India's approach. We are not going to, Syria directly, we are not that much impacted in that sense. But we want the country to be stabilized. It's an important country.
But the problem that I'm trying to tackle over here is that, for example, we have helped Palestinians a lot. But recently there was this clip that came out from Pakistan and Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, wherein there were a lot of terrorist groups and Hamas was also present over there. So isn't that dangerous for us?
Yes, very dangerous. Any kind of, we have a zero terror policy and Pakistan is a terror state. So they can very well do that. And so do the others. I mean, those Hamas is a terror group. We don't deal with them. We have not designated them terrorists, but we don't deal with them. We deal with the government in Ramallah and we do a lot for the Palestinian people. So we are not hobnobbing with them or like the others do. Pakistan, it's a stated policy of using terrorism as an instrument of their foreign policy. So they get support from Pakistan. They will talk about like Pakistan. So we have nothing to do with Hamas per se.
Yeah, we don't have anything to do with them. But the problem is that we have helped the people over there. And after helping them, Hamas coming to us, it is going the other way around.
No, Hamas is not coming to us actually. They know that. But Palestinian people, there has to be a difference. There is a military leadership there, which is totally terroristic in nature, let's say. So their way of working is very different. Then there are ordinary people. So India has stood for a Palestinian cause. There's no change in our policy. We always want a two-state solution to live side by side. And I always say that is the crux of the whole problem. Whichever way, some solution needs to come. And once the solution comes, then Hamas obviously will lose that locus standi for themselves. Why would they continue if they have their own state? You see, so this all comes from there. So we need to see that politically also they need to be stunted. Today what has happened is that if you have elections there, it's very likely that Hamas will win in Palestine because they are seen as the saviors of the Palestinian state. Now, that's the failure of the international community.
For India, IMEC is something now which is very important. And it is happening at a place which is so difficult to even to predict anything about that place. Now, recently, like the Israel-Gaza war, it was very dangerous for the IMEC. Do you think in future this plan might get derailed because of all of these issues? And how will India deal with that?
I hope not. There's no permanence in the world. You can't definitely say that tomorrow, hypothetically, you see the Iranians and Israelis, if they make up, for example, where is the problem then? A lot of problems will be resolved.
Yeah.
Palestinian issue is a state or some kind of a state becomes, then there is no issue. Problems are always there. There are no safe corridors forever. There can always be problems in the world. Nobody expected the Russia-Ukraine war will happen. Now it has taken a different turn altogether. Nobody thought that this Israel-Hamas war would last for 15 months. It lasted. So these are not the calculations at the time. Disruptions do happen, and they can happen anytime. But at the same time, you have to continue to work for connectivity, which is extremely important from our perspective. And we are kind of going ahead. Actually, it's not that we are not going ahead. We are going ahead with our UAE, with Saudi Arabia on our leg, so that we don't wait for it. That's a small lag. That there is a problem, and that problem will eventually be resolved. I hope so. And we are not only working on that, we're working on the INSTC. That is also coming under a little bit of fire now because US administration has changed its policy on waiver on Chabahar. So we are going to have that another issue.
But what should be India's long-term policy or the strategy while dealing with Middle Eastern countries?
Well, I think that India has to be, because today, I would not say what should be our policy. I think that what the Middle Eastern countries expect from us, they trust in India. They believe in India. They believe our foreign policy. They believe in Indian dream or Indian aspiration of being the third largest economy where they can partake in it. But they want India to take a greater role, whether it is security role, whether it is greater economic engagement, or being an alternate and a more sane voice, which is what they're looking at. That's why when you say you are voice of Global South, they all support you.
Yeah.
They have very similar policy of strategic autonomy today. There's a great respect between our prime minister and the leaders. So that's why there is I would say the platter is well decorated.
But with the militarization of the zone, do you think India needs to have a defensive posture?
Well, we have always had a defensive posture, but we can't be cagey about everything. There are some risks. And as Dr. Jaishankar also said, that there will be risks which we'll have to take.
Right.
When you want to become a regional power or a power, and we say we are going to be a big power, a power for the positive, not power like in the negative sense of the term. So India wants to do good, and countries are looking up to India. It's not that. I mean, every initiative we take, we have great support from the countries in the region and elsewhere, from the developing countries. That's our constituency. We need to develop that.
Right.
Yeah.
And according to you, where do we still lack? Which are the areas where we are still not focusing?
I think that, I may be totally wrong. The government of the day knows better. But I think that we should be agile and quick on our heels whenever situations happen. Give an example like that. For example, when Israel-Hamas war started, I had written about it also. I said that it's an opportunity for India to come and try to resolve that issue. Same thing, Russia-Ukraine war when it happened.
What China is trying to do, basically.
Yeah, we should have been there. We could have some special envoy. Somebody could have gone, conveyed the messages, tried to diffuse the situation. It will not resolve.
Yeah.
But you as an actor must be seen to be acting.
Right.
That's very important. But it's not only what we do behind the doors. It is also equally important to what you do openly. When you're seen to be doing something,
Right.
And then because tomorrow, otherwise, if we keep on telling everybody dialogue diplomacy, they will also tell us when we have problems, use dialogue diplomacy, So we are a power. If we are going to be a power, we need to behave like a power.
Right. So in this podcast, we've spoken about a lot of things and everything that is unfolding in the West Asia part of the world. And as we also discussed that this is one of those regions about which you just cannot predict, because every prediction, it has so many layers to it, and anything that happens over there can change so fast. So all the parts are moving in a very random manner at times. I'll ask you just one question for this podcast, which is, what do you see as the future of this region, let's say for the next 50 years?
Well, if you're asking me as a diplomat, I want them to be stable, secure, and peaceful.
That is a very political answer.
No, it's not political. It's a fact. This is how I believe in. That's the job of the diplomats is.
But what is the real truth?
Well, it's very difficult to say. As you said, also there are moving parts. A lot of things are happening. What happens in Iran's transition? What happens in Israeli transition? That will define a lot. The other countries in the region are pretty open to have a modus vivendi in the region. I would say that if somehow these countries are able to come together and try to work among themselves first, resolve, not resolve, even if not resolve, at least minimize the friction points, then they have a much better future. You see, then it cannot be exploited that easily. They have internal differences. There will always be intra-regional competition as well. There will be, but today, United States is going to be the largest oil and gas supplier. That will become a competitor for them.
Correct.
So more and more countries from there who are their buyers will also look to go to the US, also especially to please Mr. Trump. So it is quite possible that you lose the edge there. Then you have, that's why they are now diversifying their economies in the strategy. So it's important. But if they continue on the current path, which is currently the hostile and, contesting through violent and military means, and if the non-state actors continue to become more and more powerful, then you are not looking at a cohesive region or a peaceful region.
Right. And what do you think of the classroom backbenchers, which is the friendship between Iran, Russia, North Korea, Pakistan, China? How is this friendship going to affect the whole world?
You see, that is a larger geopolitical question. It will all depend on the outcome of the Russia-Ukraine war, in my view. You see, China-US competition will continue. On one level, we are seeing the Cold War 2.0 kind of a scenario playing out. But today, Trump has following two-way policy. One is to engage China, and second, to create alternatives against China. Those both are going on simultaneously, but without conflict in between. So they will continue to follow that policy. But if somehow, with China and US both wanted, if G2 kind of a matrix works out between them, then you are looking at a different kind of a world. But if that does not happen, then you will see a geopolitically divided Cold War 2.0 and geoeconomically multipolar world. Means many centers of economic power in different parts, minilaterals, plurilaterals, all those operating at least for a couple of decades. And but if the Russia-Ukraine war spreads much beyond this, then obviously, they're going to be just a bipolar world.
Okay. So I think the world is in for a ride. It could be a roller coaster ride, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen.
Let's hope for peace.
Yeah.
Let's hope for good sense to prevail.
Right.
It's very important,
Right.
which India always advocates.
Yeah.
You see, we always say our policy is value-based foreign policy, driven, of course, by national interest. That's the basic job. But we want peace. We work for peace. We tell people, Prime Minister is all the time telling everybody there is no need of war.
Yeah.
Let's see. We are trying ourselves. It's not that China, we had this problem, but we continue to talk to them. Not because we are scared. We have shown them that we can stand up to them. But at the same time, we prefer peace because that's important for our people. That's the reason. Every country, especially the countries which are trying to come up to the certain level, they need peaceful time to progress.
And that actually makes sense.
Yes.
Ambassador Anil ji, thank you so
you.
much for this conversation. I think we have discussed everything about Middle East, but it is such a region that you just can't stop talking about it. And what we have spoken about this till the time this episode airs, I don't know what will be the situation of Middle East. So I hope so we'll have to record part 2, part 3 of this particular conversation.
Inshallah, good sense will prevail.
Yes, and the boys play well. So
Shalom.
yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, my friend.